Imagine you just finished watching Bleach years ago, a series about the balance of souls that quite literally keeps the universe intact, having no idea that a faction called the Quincy's would be the ultimate enemy to threaten that balance. Then see this guy. Luffy, while simple-minded in nature, rarely stops like ever once he has a goal envisioned, showing his unwavering determination. This has been a foundational aspect of his character from the beginning in a world full of political and serious issues, just for him to flip all of these tropes we grew up to love and not take it seriously at all. This matchup has unironically been getting a lot of attention to it lately. It makes sense. Both the Bleach and One Piece anime have been popping off lately, so naturally, I'm here to do the topic. I think this is just a known fact at this point, but Gear 5 should be a higher multiplier than anything we've seen at this point in One Piece. I'm not gonna put an exact number on it because it's never stated, but with this multiplier, we can confidently say that the boy Luffy is Yonko level, or at the very least relative to that status in terms of power. Throughout the chapters 1047 through 1049, Luffy, due to his awakening, is actually shown to generate this massive Bajirang gun, which not only combines Buso Shoku emission and Hao Shoku infusion, but his other gears as well, like Gear 4's compression and the 5th gear's expansion. That's roughly the size of Onigashima in comparison, without having to blow into it like he usually does throughout the series, and ends up swinging it with all of his energy to overpower Kaido. Man, did Kaido have Luffy in the mud for 4 years. Bro, I'm joking. How this feat is determined depends on your interpretation of the size of Onigashima based on art depictions within the manga or anime. Both are contentiously up to scale and suffer from art inconsistency, which is just one of many limitations when it comes to doing stuff like calcs. And unfortunately for you and me, this is a cross-verse matchup, so calcs and numbers is sort of necessary to see how one verse stacks up against the other. I'ma simplify most of these methods instead of completely nerding out, so everyone can get the gist of it. The best and most agreeable way to calc this feat is by measuring the length of the Bajirang gun itself. By doing that, we could also get the radius, width, and height of it as well, and compare that to Onigashima's horn by using these two scans in particular. I'm not going to waste your time with the numbers and values. I'm going to just put them on screen, you do you. From there, we can use the formula for the volume of a cylinder to find the volume of the Bajirang gun, since it does appear to be cylindrical. After doing that, we can determine how much kinetic energy the Bajirang gun itself poses. Assuming it took 1 to 2 seconds to reach Kaido, since it came out of the clouds relatively fast, and taking into consideration the density of rubber, the kinetic energy of the Bajirang gun should reach 10 to the 24 joules, or continental level. And this is just how much energy the Bajirang gun poses, let alone outputting that energy. Considering that the Bajirang gun has the 4th gear's compression, the calc would most definitely go up, considering that Gear 4 itself is already a 30 to 40 times increase off a base at the least. And while Kaido in his dragon form did match the Bajirang gun head on, he got put to sleep respectfully when it was fully swung directly at him, while in its decompression, which is just the reduction of its compression being let out. This would ultimately reach 10 to the 25 joules or multi-continental level. So if we ignore all connotations, lore, and story elements that suggest the One Piece planet is far bigger than our real-life Earth, Luffy in the 5th gear can consistently be placed right under the planetary benchmark as a lowball, and Kaido is quote-unquote rumored to be the strongest alive or the strongest creature alive. Now, whether you actually believe those statements is certainly up for debate, as the sources of those statements literally do not exist. But regardless, Kaido should be relative to the other Yonko, even in his dragon form, to the point where there isn't an astronomical gap between them. This is even implied in the Blue Deep data book and the 2nd volume of the Ace novel as well. And pretty much everything regarding the abilities Luffy has in Gear 5, such as Road to Laugh Tale, statements from Kaido himself, and promotional material for the anime, hammer home that Luffy does have a form of Toon Force, alongside a form of subjective reality manipulation as well, that's obviously limited to his imagination. We are actually shown displays of this in case anyone disagrees, like Luffy defying conventional physics by running on the air, or being able to make Kaido's body stretchy and elastic. And finally, Luffy was also shown being able to imagine sunglasses in the manga as well, which obviously the anime has not caught up to yet, at least by the time I'm recording this video. When it comes to speed, most of the light speed and FTL metas heavily stem from Kizaru, Queen's beams, and Kaido himself, Kizaru is literally stated to be able to move and fight at light speed. An old Whitebeard that's on life support has been shown to intercept Kizaru's light body. Even Rayleigh was shown to intercept his light body and show relativity to him in combat. In fact, since Whole Cake, both of Sanji's brothers, Nanji has an attack called Henry Blazer that's explicitly stated to move at light speed when using it, and Ichiji has an attack called Sparking Valkyrie that shoots lasers and functions pretty spot on to what's considered laser or light beams. From there, you could easily use the gear multipliers to get Luffy faster than light, let alone the multiplier from Gear 5 that concretely puts him in that Yonko echelon. Overall, denying that the high tiers in One Piece being FTL is just refusing to get with the times at this point, with anything higher than FTL being questionable or wank. Now on the other side of this matchup, Gremmy has been a subject of debate for Bleach for almost a full decade on whether he scales to his visionary or the things he's able to conjure from his imagination into reality. For those who scale Bleach or been around in the power scaling community, you know this all too well and where this can go, so I'll explain for those who are just here to see the matchup play out. Gremmy is limited to only 6 chapter appearances in 1,000 Year Blood War, but within those chapters he has arguably some of the most impressive feats throughout all of Bleach. I think the most infamous feat everyone knows by now is when Gremmy is shown to materialize a literal expanse of outer space that's shown to encompass a galaxy to potentially multiple. Some argue that this falls into illustration interpretation due to it looking like a cluster of stars, when that is factually incorrect, or they get even more desperate to use the anime and try to downplay the feat due to the anime handling the feat differently in its portrayal and blah blah blah. The Bleach anime has handled a lot of things differently from the manga. I think the most blatant example of this is when the anime changes how the scene of Aranyeto dodging light works, where in the manga you can clearly see his face still drawn in the dark and is able to sonito to a different position before the light actually reaches where he and Rukia were even standing. Plus, many fictional verses have instances like this where you can clearly see the intent of what the creator or author is going for. I can point to verses like Elden Ring, for example. There's a galaxy in Ronnie's moon that has a very, if not spot-on shape to the galaxy in Gremmy's outer space, and we don't ever disregard it for Ronnie for the reasons people come up with for Gremmy, despite Gremmy having a more blatant case of the feat. Unfortunately, a lot of people like to disregard this as it's just hacks. I don't want to get too deep into how Quincy's fight in Bleach, and that can really be a video on its own. But for the people who say this, I'm just going to say it. Did you actually read Bleach? And I'm genuinely not trying to sound like this god and say you must listen to my objective fact. I had to read all of Bleach, all 3 volumes of Can't Fear Your Own World, and both volumes of Spirits Are Forever With You to even make this video. And I have no idea where this argument comes from. Well, let me take that back. Now, obviously, not every shrift is AP based. However, saying that applies to Gremmy's shrift is inconsistent for many reasons. There's actually mountains of evidence and statements where Gremmy explicitly refers to his imagination as power, and he also directly uses his imagination to amplify his stats. Knowing how Quincy's fight and how they can gather ambient reishi, there's nothing besides Gremmy being capable of erasing people from existence to suggest the visionary works any differently than how Quincy's manipulate reishi. We also know that Quincy's can in fact create spaces with reishi. Boom! Mic drop. For speed, Zaraki in Spirits Are Forever With You has this all-out battle in the Garganta against Cien Grans, and it's actually stated that they both individually had a power cliff to Vasta Lorde Ichigo level in terms of Reiatsu by Uryu, and further supported by Asashiro as well. With this being the case, Zaraki at this point as a low ball should scale to Okiora's Sero Ascaris, which is not only faster than a regular Sero, which is stated to be light in the mass databook, but also more impressive than Aranyeto dodging light as well, due to the multiplication factor of Resurrection or the first release of an Arankar, putting Zaraki into the FTL plus ranges. We actually do know that Bankai and Resurrection are similar multipliers for those with releases attributed to physical stats, being 5 to 10 times greater, and in Bleach, Reiatsu correlates to AP and speed, so by extension, Gremmy scales to this. We even see Gremmy keeping up with and reacting to Zaraki's attacks. You can also scale Gremmy's speed 2 other ways, via calcing how fast he created outer space, or scaling him off of Lil Tato dodging one of the Oshuelan light beams. There are multiple methods to get the speed for those 2 specific feats. but this is the general scaling for Gremmy's speed. Now, how does the fight actually go? I feel bad for One Piece fans, but Luffy gets splattered, and it's not close. Simply just outlining the stats, Gremmy is way too much for someone like Luffy, plus he has numerous ways to win this fight. Gremmy can literally blitz and erase Luffy's existence by just not imagining a future for Luffy anymore. Luffy would have no resistance to this, as there is no existence erasure resistance feat that he has shown yet. Gremmy can also surround Luffy in a cube of water beyond his perception and drown him by doing that as well. Even if Gremmy was cocky and let Luffy try some hacks that he has in the 5th gear, which for the most part is his Toon Force or cartoon physics, it still wouldn't even work on Gremmy, as we see in Bleach that any hacks ever thrown at someone who is stronger doesn't work as efficiently as someone that's flat out weaker than you. I feel like many people forget this, but Quincy's do have Reiatsu. Literally everyone in Bleach has access to it if their Ryoku is pretty insane. We see this with Uryu negging the effects of Mayori's paralysis when he started to absorb all of the surrounding reishi around him, or when Zaraki in the 2nd volume of Spirits Are Forever With You negs the effects and protects his organs from these voodoo-like dolls from Cien Grans that contains like these tenders and organs within them, and if destroyed, that damage gets transferred to the opponent he's fighting. And a similar rule applies in One Piece, where if you simply have stronger haki, then you can just negate their abilities. This would apply to this matchup using verse equalization. So if we say haki, which is basically a blend of spiritual energy and one's willpower, with Ryoku having similar aspects being equal to each other, then Gremmy absolutely destroys Luffy with probably actually no difficulty. Luffy's Toon Force encompasses at the lowest of lows, multi-continental, all the way up to star level, dare I say it, with that meta being built on a whole lot of presuppositions to even scale him that high to begin with. I want to cover more Bleach related topics in future videos, going over inverse stuff and even cross-verse debates, seeing how certain characters in Bleach that isn't Gremmy stack up to other characters in fiction. I feel like if you watched either of these or read both mangas, it's pretty easy to see who comes out on top. So to answer your question, could Luffy beat Gremmy? In your dreams. Special thanks to the guys Tylearned and Captain for helping me with some Luffy hacks knowledge and so on that I was not aware of. Both of these goats make dope content on their channels, especially content around One Piece if you're interested in that.